Eyewitness News presents Newsmakers, winner of the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Award for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming, with your hosts, Jane Ann Bugda and Andy Mahalchik.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Andy Mahalchik.
And I'm Jane Ann Bugda. Today we'll have an open and frank discussion about a very difficult topic, suicide.
We'll hear from two people whose lives were impacted by suicide and learn about an organization that offers support and help.
We'll introduce you to our guests, and our discussion will begin when this edition of Newsmakers returns right after this. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Jane Ann Bugda along with Andy Mahalchik, and our topic of conversation today is suicide awareness. While we're discussing, below on the screen we'll have numbers for you to call if you need someone to talk to or need more information. And our panel today, joining us to discuss the topic of suicide awareness, is Kathy Wallace, who is the Vice President of the Northeast Suicide Prevention Initiative, Kerry Bentler, who's a certified forensic peer specialist, and Paula Donesco, who lost a loved one to suicide. They'll be sharing their stories with us today, and we want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for doing a program on this.
Because it's a topic that is very much in the news and very much affects many people, and we want to thank you for coming on and sharing your stories.
Thanks for having us.
First, we want to talk about, just to begin, is to talk a little bit about the Northeast Suicide Prevention Initiative.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about that, Kathy.
We're all volunteers. There's no paid staff. It started out a bunch of people in response to leaving a national organization because we didn't feel that they were doing anything locally for us. And so that was 5 years ago, and we're still going. What we really try to do is build upon needs that are recognized in the community, and not just in Lackawanna. It's a number of communities, and we work with some other groups in our area, in Hazelton, Wayne County, Susquehanna.
So you touch a large
Yes,
portion
and
of our
all
viewing.
ages. Not only we do suicide prevention, but we also do what we call loss support for people who've lost someone to suicide.
I want to start with the first question is, in my mind, is suicide still a taboo subject? Is it still something people don't want to talk about? Just the word suicide scares people, I think.
Yeah.
It does.
What do you think?
I think it is. I think we've come a long way, but we're not there yet.
I agree.
I think they're afraid to approach it.
Yeah.
And maybe by bringing it up, it may stir some raw emotions with some people.
We compare it to how people used to address cancer. You know, I can remember when you never spoke about someone having cancer.
No.
And hopefully that's where suicide will get to. Because programs like this and people who come forth, that really lowers the stigma and really helps out a lot. But I agree with Kerry that we've come a long way. What surprises me is how many people know nothing about suicide. And I'm so used to being with people who are involved with it that it surprises me.
Do people think they know about suicide and they really don't?
Yes.
That sounds strange,
That's
but
a good
they
question.
don't.
Yes,
No,
you're
no,
absolutely
they
right.
don't.
No, they don't.
And, Kerry and Paula, you're both here today to tell us a little bit. So, Kerry, share your story a little bit with our audience.
I'm actually an attempt survivor. I also have a daughter who is an attempt survivor, and I have her permission to talk about her. But my first suicide attempt was when I was 12. It's hard. I struggle, and to this day, with suicidal ideations. I always knew there was something different with me because I do live with mental illnesses, but suicide doesn't just have to do with mental illnesses. So I went through my whole life in silence, afraid to tell anyone. Even in school, I used to look at the girls or the other kids walking down thinking like, oh, I wonder if they, hear voices, or I wonder if they don't, want to kill themselves, or I wonder if they're not happy in their lives. But I was so afraid to be ostracized. I really didn't know about mental illness, but I also knew that if I said something, I would get put put away. And the reason is because you hear people like way back, well, this is back when I was, we're talking the 1980s and 90s, you would hear, so-and-so mother had a nervous breakdown and she's in a state hospital, so I really didn't know I had mental illnesses, and I didn't know what, about the suicide stuff, but I just knew that I couldn't say anything to anyone. I kept my self-harming to myself, I kept my suicidal ideations to myself, and I had many attempts that were called interrupted attempts, where someone interrupted them. Then there are attempts that are just attempts, and thank God I'm alive. Then there are attempts. I don't like the word, but they call them aborted attempts, and that is where I would get my meds and I would just say I'm going to take them and then stop myself. So it wasn't interrupted by someone else, so it was aborted by myself. So also stockpiling. I used to stockpile my medication. It's kind of like a suicidal ideation method. It's not a plan. It's not like saying you have a plan, but it's a method. It was my method. I used to stockpile my meds. Yeah, so I struggled my whole life to date. Just 3 months ago, I was hospitalized inpatient for severe depression and suicidal thoughts. And I went through ECT treatments. So it's
a day-to-day
it's a day-to-day struggle for me. Yes.
And Paula, you're someone who's experienced a suicide from a different aspect because you lost someone.
My daughter was 28 years old. Her name was Catherine, and she had 2 attempts earlier. Her first one was about 15 or 16 years old, and I saw it coming just in her behavior, and we tried. Thanks to Kerry, she worked a lot with my daughter, but it was unsuccessful, and she overdosed on sleeping pills that she bought at the dollar store.
And, and it's difficult for someone, at home, listening to you talk about the story, who may also be in your situation where you're grieving the loss of a daughter, but you need support too. How important is that?
She's our biggest cheerleader. We have a support group that meets once a month at Allied Services, and it's for people who've lost someone to suicide. And I'm privileged to be the facilitator, and I've met wonderful people. Like I said, our organization are all volunteers, and the reason, and people say, who have you lost? I haven't lost anyone, thank God. And but I've just met such wonderful people. And Paula and Kerry even, Kerry will come and explain to people, it's not your fault. In fact, I can remember a story. She said she woke up in intensive care once, and the first thing she did, looked at her mother and said, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that I'm here. There was nothing you could do. And I've learned more from her than I have at any conference, and thank God for the 2 of them to share their story to help other people.
She got me to the support group.
Yeah.
Carrie told me about the support group, and I'm just very thankful because it's helped me. My son has come, who was having some struggles. He was very close with his sister, and it's helped him. I've seen a change in him just by going to the meeting.
And Paul, I'm sure there are people out there watching this program now thinking they may be in the same situation. If you can, did you try and love her to survive? In other words, was that obviously not enough, but was it frustrating knowing you felt like it was going to happen and the support was there, but what do you tell people who might say, I can handle this by myself? I can love my loved one, and that will save his or her life.
No matter what you try to do, I've talked to her, I've sat with her. and she just her self-esteem, I saw just really going downhill, and she left behind a 5-year-old son, and just talking about him, and she was a very good mother and very loving with him, but she couldn't handle everything that was thrown at her, and she
the do it alone thing, you can absolutely not do it alone. I was with Paula and her daughter through a lot of it. I was there at weekly. We took her to NAMI meetings, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, who was a very, very important organization to me. I served on the board of directors for quite a time, but because they helped me so much. So it helps to know you're not alone. You can absolutely not do this yourself. Please don't try to do it yourself. There are a lot of organizations out there, good organizations that can help you. And I always say, even just a friend or someone that you trust, if you're not ready to take that step yet, I call them a go-to person. And I have a few. So I really, that question is a good question. You cannot do it alone.
But how do you get that? I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
What you had asked, is love enough? Can that help? We really want to stress suicide isn't the same for everybody, as Kerry had said. There are some people out there that never had any idea that their child or their mother or father had any thoughts of suicide. But I'll tell you, once again, the reason that I do this is because of the wonderful people I met, and they're very loving. Their lives will never be the same. There's no way to sugarcoat that.
No.
Your life changes.
Your life
and
changes.
it'll never
So
be
sorry
the same.
for your loss.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But how do you begin the conversation with someone that you think may be suicidal? I know we're showing warning signs, but you said that those warning signs to be someone over a period of time.
Yes.
So how do you begin the conversation with someone?
I think the most important thing is don't be afraid to begin the conversation. Talk to them in private. Let them know what you're worried about. I really care about you. I'm worried about you because I see you more irritable or starting fights or skipping school or drinking more or isolating yourself. Tell them what you're concerned with. And don't be afraid to say, sometimes when people are showing these behaviors, they're thinking end of their life. Or if you know that they are going through a divorce, I know this is a really hard time, and you just seem like, you're not pulling yourself out of this. Have you thought of ending your life? You have to say, have you thought of suicide? And it opens the door for them.
I wish someone asked me.
Yeah.
I wasn't diagnosed till I was 30 with mental illnesses, but the suicide attempts were throughout. But I agree with Kathy. I think actually, after talking like that, are you thinking about hurting yourself, killing yourself? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? You just have to talk about it. You have to come right out. You can't get around it.
You can't get around it. And even that's not a guarantee.
Right.
Because especially somebody who's been in the mental health system, they know that they think that those words will get them sent right to a hospital. So they know, which a lot of families will say, they know what to say. When they go to the hospital, this is woman. I'd say 98% of people, they'll want the help, and they will tell you if they're asked.
The hospital part, I would love to stress this because so many times you don't have to go to a hospital.
Yes.
If you talk in time and if you get that support in time, believe me, I was one of those who would lie and say I didn't, because I didn't want to go to a hospital. But now, after being more educated and working in the field, and I work in the mental health treatment courts, and I do I'm on the board with Kathy and stuff, but you don't always have to go to a hospital.
Yes.
That's the thing. It could be prevented and it could be helped. And
in fact, one of our big advocacy issues is the mental health system.
Right.
And how it doesn't really address suicide. And there's a lot of people think if you're a therapist, you automatically have training in this. And you don't. You absolutely don't. So one of our advocacy issues is to either change the laws or change the credentials for social workers, psychologists, that they have to have suicide prevention training. In Pennsylvania, educators have to have 4 hours of training every 5 years. Therapists only have to have 1 hour every 2 years. So they could be doing the same basic suicide 101 And the teacher and educator will know more about it than the therapist.
Fact or myth? I remember growing up and hearing, and if somebody talks about suicide, they really don't want to do it. In other words, if they're talking about it, don't worry about it. They just want the attention. They'll never do it.
That's false. It is I think it's important to say, because we hear, oh, you know, they took the easy way out, they're a coward and everything. It's not easy to end your life. Just our makeup and our biology, we want to live. And so people who talk about it really want somebody to take them and get some help. That's the bottom line. But we've heard that for years. There's so many myths out there. You could do an hour-and-a-half show just on myths, but that is a myth. They talk about it because they want to ask for help and they just don't know how to.
Is there a certain age group that you see a rise in suicides?
We're seeing younger and younger kids
Yeah.
dying from suicide or attempting suicide. If you talk to teachers, and we do a lot of trainings for educators, they're scared because they're seeing younger and younger kids. And teenagers don't have necessarily a high rate. Well, they're not the most, the population that ends their life most, but they have a high rate compared to how many of them there are, how many attempts they have, and unfortunately, how many die by suicide.
Right.
Schools see it all the time.
And when you're talking about suicide, and you're talking about beginning the conversation with someone, and then you look at someone like Paula.
Yeah.
And what do you say to someone who has lost a loved one? Is there, you know, how do we say you're sorry, or what do you say to someone? I mean,
Just give them a hug.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are afraid
Yeah.
though. They don't know.
Right.
They
They
don't
are.
know what to say. It's not
Yeah.
like someone. You know, I'm not saying dying in a car accident
Right.
isn't bad, but
Yeah.
it's such a different way to die, and even mourning. I don't know. I think it's a different way to mourn. I think it's.
We talk about that in the support group
Yeah.
a lot.
It's so different.
Everybody, there's just so many questions
Yes, the whys.
that are unanswered. And
You don't get
You
the
just-
support grieving.
No.
We have in fact, we did a brochure on what to say to someone, because so many people have come to the support group. And even your son, when he came to the support group, his question was, I'm so afraid somebody will ask how my sister died.
He don't know what to say.
And thank God people aren't ashamed anymore. The stigma's still there, but once you make up your mind, this is the result of a medical complication. It really is. And
well, he
that
brought
people
that up,
share.
he brought that up at the meeting, and one person looked at him and said, well, suicide is just another word for death. Your sister died. And, you know, it kind of calmed him down a little bit, and seemed to handle it better after the meeting.
And you know, people in our group and yourself have said that, you know, when it first happens, there's nothing you could say that's going to change that, but say something. And as your grief journey goes along, please don't be afraid to go up to Paula and say, you know, I was thinking of Kathy the other day.
I was just going to say, don't be
It's
afraid
so
to say their name.
comforting.
Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to say their name. Like, say their name, and
Yeah.
I'll text her and I'll say, was thinking about Kathy, or well, certain things on her. But you know what? I think you have to say the name,
Yeah.
and you have to.
I put a funny license plate on the front of my car, and people will ask, well, it was a gift I had bought for her, and she wouldn't let me put it on her car. And they said, why do you have that? I said, because it gives me a chance to talk about her. And I can tell you the type of person that she was, and the sense of humor that she had. And I mean, hers was a lot different than mine, but
I like it.
still, it just brought up
it
a
gives you a
conversation.
chance
Yeah.
to even heal in your own
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. We want to remind you that we have information today on pahomepage.com, run of the Newsmakers link, and we also have a variety of stories on there about different national efforts about suicide. You're watching Newsmakers, and we are a proud recipient of 3 Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Awards for excellence in public affairs programming, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Jane Ann Bugd along with Andy Mahalchik. We're joined by Kathy Wallace, Carrie Bentler, and Paula Donesco, and we're discussing suicide awareness. And the problem is coming to a national forefront and also very much so in the state that they are starting a listening tour.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this listening tour.
It's only there's a new state task force, suicide prevention task force, and I don't even know if it's 6 months in the making. And one of the things that they're going to do, which is an excellent idea, is they're going to be going to different regions in Pennsylvania and asking people who've been touched by suicide in one way or another, or who may work in a school where they've had a death, and ask them what they feel would benefit Pennsylvania and their area in particular. Some counties have task forces, and they're hoping the task force comes and tells the state what they're working on, what they need help with, and so really it's a great opportunity.
We were talking before about a suicide national hotline. I would have assumed there was always one out there.
No.
But that's not the case.
No.
Is it because of just culturally we weren't ready for it, or society wasn't ready for it?
I think you know what? Years ago, we didn't know that much about suicide, and we still don't know why, but we have so many more tools. And the national, what they call Lifeline, is a big tool. In fact, after a celebrity's death, the amount of calls that go into that national Lifeline, it just goes up unbelievably. You could call that number if you're in crisis yourself or you're concerned about someone. They could help give you some ideas, but it is a long number. And they're talking about coming out with the 3-digit number. Like right now it's an 800 number. And then for veterans you press 1, and for anyone else you could just go right into it. But a 3-digit number would be so much easier to remember. We, in our organization, we have little resource cards with the National Lifeline number on it because it's hard to remember.
And the bracelets.
And the bracelets,
Yeah.
Very quickly, you just said, I thought, keyword, we don't know why.
We don't.
There's no cookie cutter
No.
or blueprint.
No.
I mean,
Because there's not just one reason. There's, Carrie has some serious mental illnesses.
Also have suicide in the, it could run in your family.
Oh, I was
Yes,
It
gonna
can
say
run in your family without
it
having
does
mental
run in the
illnesses.
family.
Yeah.
We've had a
Without-
number of people that, their grandfather would die and their father would say, I know the pain people go through, I'd never do that. Then he ends up taking their life. And so the education and asking for help, that's the key, is asking for help. And so it's just, there's a lot to be done. We know that, but there's no funding for it. There's absolutely no funding whatsoever.
you were saying before, tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Because we hear oftentimes that person committed suicide, but they had so much to live for.
Yes.
Your daughter had a son.
Yes.
This one has a
Yeah.
family. They're successful. They're,
Yeah.
whatever.
I get that too.
Explain that
Carrie,
tunnel vision.
What were you?
Let's start with commit.
I was just going to say that.
We don't say commit anymore. We say died by suicide, because commit is like they committed a crime and they didn't. So we're trying to do we do people first language, and we're trying to
So they
start
died
that.
by suicide,
And
or they
they
ended their
died by
life.
suicide, or they ended their life. Commit sounds like they committed a crime. So that's the first
Yeah.
thing. But you were asking me about tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. Like,
Yeah,
in other words, weren't you thinking about your love,
No,
your
a lot
daughter,
of people ask me that.
or anything else?
Were you thinking about your daughter? Weren't you thinking about your loved ones? Weren't you thinking about your family? And when I'm in that state, I have severe tunnel vision. I just want to get out of the pain. I just want the pain to go away. And before my tunnel vision comes, if I have a brief thought, my daughter, my friends, my family, my work that I do, my job to help others, I think, well, then everybody will be better off without me. Like I'm no worth. And then the tunnel vision hits. And once that tunnel vision hits, and it's very impulsive. It's very impulsive. And so it is hard, but the tunnel vision is hard, and it's just personally for me, I want to get out of the pain, and I think that's what a lot of people, they just want to get out of the pain.
We have about 2 minutes left. And if somebody's out there watching and thinking to themselves, I have no one to talk to, what do you say to them?
I would say definitely call that Lifeline number. That they're trained, they care, or they wouldn't be doing this. And just remember, your brain lies to you. You know, there are people there. Maybe you've isolated yourself that, you know, you don't have daily contact with someone, but people really, really do care. They really care.
And if you're on someone who has lost someone to suicide, what do you say to them?
Well, I did reach out to a couple people that I didn't know them directly, but I knew family members. And, you know, I've talked to them a couple of times and tried to get them to the meeting. But I said, when you're ready. You know, I don't push. And even I had talked to his sister, and I said, you know, when he comes over your house, just give him a hug.
Right.
He's not looking for anything else. And that's what I just try to tell people.
But please say something.
Say something.
Please say something.
We want to know
Yeah.
we're not alone.
Well,
To me, the big thing is you're not alone, and you just want to feel
Just to be there for
just to
them.
be there for them.
Fascinating discussion.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And
I learned a lot in the last half hour.
I really have to. And we have all the numbers and the information on pahomepage.com. And the ladies are always available to speak to organizations and
absolutely,
groups.
yes,
We'll have
yes,
that
yeah.
information on there as
Yeah.
well.
We do trainings.
Thank you so much for joining us
you.
today. It was a
Well,
very
thanks for giving us the
opportunity.
interesting conversation. For everyone behind the scenes and Andy Mahalchik, I'm Jane Ann Bugda. Thank you so much for making Newsmakers part of your day. Check us out on pahomepage.com or under the Newsmakers link, and we'll talk again next time.